At the will reading, they said do this for the family, so I smiled and let the lawyer speak. Hey, have you ever sat in a room full of family members who swear they love you, only to feel the emotional knife twisting slowly? Picture this: a quiet, elegant law office, everyone dressed in black, pretending to grieve but really just waiting to carve up the inheritance. That's exactly what happens in the viral story titled At the Will Reading. They said do this for the family, so I smiled and let the lawyer speak. We've all felt that marital manipulation at some point, that emotional guilt trip disguised as family duty. Maybe it came from a controlling husband, maybe from in-laws who mastered gaslighting in marriage long before it had a name. They make you feel like saying no would tear the whole family apart. But what if I told you there's a way to flip the script, a silent revenge that turns psychological control into complete power reversal? This isn't just another dramatic relationship story. It's the emotional turnaround we all secretly crave when we've been pushed too far. Curious how one calm smile and a single sentence can shatter years of emotional betrayal and family pressure. Stick with me, because by the end you'll see how the quiet ones often win the loudest victories, and you might just find the strength to plan your own. You know that moment when you walk into a room expecting closure, but the air already feels like it's holding its breath? That's exactly where Isabella Montez found herself that Tuesday afternoon. The law office was all dark wood and hushed voices, the kind of place where people speak in whispers even when there's no funeral. Isabella, 34, elegant in a simple black sheath dress and pearls that had belonged to her mother, sat straight-backed in one of the leather chairs. She truly believed this was just a formality, her father's final wishes, read aloud, respected, done. After all, had always treated her with fairness, even when her controlling husband, Raphael, tried to paint her as too emotional for business matters. No one imagines an ambush at a will reading. It's supposed to be sacred ground. The family was all there, Raphael beside her, hand resting possessively on her knee, her two brothers with their wives, a couple of cousins who'd flown in out of respect. Everyone kept their eyes down, the way people do when they're trying not to look too eager. Isabella noticed the little things, the way her sister-in-law kept smoothing her skirt, the faint smell of expensive perfume masking tension. She told herself it was normal grief. People process loss differently. She had no idea that the same people mourning her father were already rehearsing how to use emotional guilt against her. Isabella's father, Victor Montez, had built a small real estate empire from nothing. Everyone knew the lake house, the commercial properties, and the trust fund were substantial. Isabella had never asked for details. She trusted her dad. Had always said, "He'll take care of you, Bella. No one will push you around after him gone." Sitting there, she clung to that promise like a lifeline. In her marriage, she had already learned how quickly love could twist into marital manipulation, how Raphael's quiet comments could become gaslighting in marriage until she doubted her own memory. But this? This was family. Blood. Surely different. The lawyer, Mr. Harlan, cleared his throat and opened the thick folder. The room went completely still. Isabella folded her hands in her lap, breathing steady. She thought whatever Dad decided, he'll accept it with grace. That's what a good daughter does. That's what keeps the peace. Years of living with a controlling husband had trained her well. Swallow the lump, smile softly, don't rock the boat. She honestly believed dignity would protect her here. But even as Mr. Harlan began with the standard preamble, Isabella felt the first tiny crack in her calm. Raphael's fingers tightened on her knee, not comfort, but warning. Across the table, her older brother Diego shot her a quick glance that felt calculated. She brushed it off. Grief makes people act strange, right? Still, a small voice whispered that something was off. She just didn't know yet how deep the psychological control ran, even beyond her marriage. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it should. Isabella focused on the portrait of her father hanging behind the lawyer's desk, his kind eyes, his gentle smile. Dad wouldn't let anyone hurt me, she told herself. This is just procedure. Yet her stomach began to knot, the way it used to when Raphael would say, "You're overreacting, Bella. It's for your own good." That familiar drip of emotional guilt was already starting, and the will hadn't even been read. She glanced around again. Everyone looked appropriately somber, but there was an undercurrent she couldn't name. Like actors waiting for their cue. Isabella took a slow breath. She'd spent years perfecting the art of staying calm under pressure, first with Raphael's subtle control, then with the family's quiet judgments. Today would be no different. Or so she thought. The real drama in relationships often hides in plain sight, wearing mourning clothes. Mr. Harlan adjusted his glasses and finally began, "I, Victor Antonio Montes, being of sound mind." Isabella's heart gave a hopeful little jump. Sound mind. That meant clarity, fairness. Whatever came next, it would be her father's true voice speaking. She leaned forward just a fraction, ready to honor him. Ready to prove she could handle this without tears or drama. Little did she know the emotional betrayal waiting in the next few pages and how it would ignite the silent revenge she'd been carrying for years. This topic sets the stage perfectly, drawing the viewer in with immediate empathy for Isabella. It highlights the quiet buildup of tension and plants those early seeds of marital manipulation and family psychological control without giving anything away yet. Topic 2: The disguised family pressure presented as love. You ever notice how the people who claim to love you the most can sometimes wield that love like a weapon? That's exactly what started creeping into the room before Mr. Harlan even got to the meat of the will. Isabella sat there, still holding on to her composure, when the whispers began, soft enough to seem innocent, loud enough to reach her ears. Her brother Diego leaned over to Raphael, but his voice carried just far enough. "We'll need to keep things fair for everyone." Fair. That word always sounded so noble until you realized it usually meant someone else was about to lose something. Isabella felt the first prick of unease, the same way she felt it at home when her controlling husband would say, "I'm only thinking of us," right before overriding her choices. Raphael's hand, still on her knee, gave a subtle squeeze, not tender, more like a reminder of who was in charge. He murmured low, "Whatever happens, Bella, we'll handle it together." Together. In their 8 years of marriage, together had slowly turned into marital manipulation disguised as teamwork. She'd learned to spot the pattern, first the gentle suggestion, then the emotional guilt if she hesitated. Now, watching him exchange quick glances with her brothers, she wondered if this script had been rehearsed long before today. The room hadn't even heard the will yet, and the pressure was already building like storm clouds. Across the table, her sister-in-law Carla offered a sympathetic smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Your dad would want us all taken care of," Carla said softly, as if reading from the same playbook. Taken care of. Another loaded phrase. Isabella knew that tonight was the same one Raphael used when he'd convinced her to skip girls' nights for the sake of our marriage. Emotional betrayal doesn't always come with shouting, sometimes it arrives wrapped in concern, smelling like expensive perfume and family loyalty. Then came the line that flipped her stomach. Diego looked straight at her and said, calm as Sunday morning, "Whatever Dad decided, I know you'll do the right thing for the family. Do this for the family." The words landed soft but heavy, the way a velvet glove hides a steel grip. Everyone nodded, small encouraging nods, like they were cheering her on to volunteer for her own sacrifice. Isabella felt the psychological control tighten, not just from Raphael anymore, but from the entire room. It was gaslighting in marriage expanded to gaslighting in family, making her feel selfish for even considering her own needs. Isabella kept her face neutral, the way she'd practiced in the mirror after too many arguments where Raphael told her she was overreacting. But inside, the indignation sparked. She'd spent years shrinking herself to keep peace in her marriage, tiptoeing around her controlling husband's moods. And now the family wanted her to shrink again. For them. The air grew thicker with unspoken expectations. The lake house should stay in the family, meaning with the brothers, the trust should be shared equally, meaning divided to favor the ones with kids. All before a single clause had been read. Carla reached over and patted Isabella's hand. "We're all in this together, sweetie. No one wants conflict." Conflict. As if saying no would be the conflict, not the coordinated push to make her give up what was rightfully hers. Isabella recognized the tactic instantly. It mirrored the emotional guilt Raphael layered on whenever she pushed back. You don't want to fight, do you? Think of what this does to us. Now the us had grown to include everyone in the room except her. The lawyer shuffled papers, ready to begin, but the whispers didn't stop. Little asides about keeping Dad's legacy intact and not letting money divide us. Each comment was wrapped in love, delivered with sad eyes and gentle voices, making it impossible to call out without looking cold. Isabella felt the familiar trap closing. If she resisted later, she'd be painted as the greedy one, the troublemaker. The same way Raphael painted her as difficult when she questioned his late nights or secret accounts. Classic psychological control: make the victim feel like the villain for protecting herself. And the worst part? They genuinely believed they were being kind. In their minds, asking Isabella to sacrifice was an act of love, proof of her devotion to family. Just like Raphael believed his controlling behavior was protecting her. The silent agreement in the room was almost palpable. She would understand, she would step aside gracefully, she would do this for the family. Because that's what good wives and good daughters do. The pressure wasn't loud, it was loving, relentless, and perfectly disguised. This moment plants the seeds of collective emotional manipulation so deeply that the viewer feels Isabella's growing indignation right alongside her. It mirrors real-life relationship drama where love becomes leverage, and sets up the perfect contrast for her later power reversal. By now the room had settled into a kind of quiet certainty that Isabella would fold, just like she always had. No one was yelling, no one was pointing fingers that would have been too obvious. Instead, the humiliation came wrapped in silence, the kind that presses down on your chest until breathing feels optional. Isabella felt every pair of eyes flick toward her and then away, as if looking too long might force them to acknowledge what they were doing. Raphael shifted beside her, his cologne suddenly too strong, his presence a reminder of all the times he'd used quiet disapproval to keep her in line. This wasn't just marital manipulation anymore, it had grown into a full family effort. She realized, with a clarity that almost made her dizzy, that this wasn't a request, it was an expectation carved in stone. They weren't asking her to consider the family, they were informing her that she would. The silence itself became the weapon. No one needed to say "you owe us" out loud when the weight of their combined gaze said it louder than words. Isabella recognized the tactic instantly. It was the same psychological control Raphael used at home when he'd go quiet for days after she disagreed with him, letting the emotional guilt build until she apologized for something she hadn't done. Her brother Diego cleared his throat softly, the sound cutting through the room like a judge's gavel. Everyone adjusted their posture just a fraction, leaning in, ready for her to play her assigned role. Isabella's cheeks burned, but not from tears, from the sheer injustice of it. She'd spent years navigating gaslighting in marriage, questioning her own memory, her own feelings, just to keep peace. And now the entire family was running the same playbook. Make her feel like resisting would be selfish, like saying no would shatter something sacred. Carla offered another small, pitying smile, the kind that says "poor thing, she'll come around." That smile stung worse than any insult. It positioned Isabella as the fragile one, the emotional one, the one who needed to be gently guided into doing the right thing. Raphael's hand moved to the back of her neck now, thumb stroking in slow circles that felt less like comfort and more like ownership. The message was clear: don't create a problem. Don't embarrass us. The same words had whispered the night she found questionable charges on their joint account, only then it had been "don't embarrass me." No one spoke directly to her anymore. They spoke around her, about her, as if she were already agreed. Diego murmured something to the lawyer about hoping "we can keep this amicable," and Mr. Harlan nodded politely, but his eyes flicked to Isabella with something like concern. She caught it, had tiny acknowledgement that not everyone in the room was playing the same game. Still, the family's silent consensus was suffocating. Good daughters, good wives, don't fight for what's yours if it inconveniences others. Isabella's pulse hammered in her ears, but outwardly she remained perfectly still. She'd learned long ago that any sign of distress would be used against her, proof she was too sensitive, just like Raphael loved to say. The humiliation wasn't in loud accusations, it was in the assumption that she would comply without protest. They expected her to nod, to sign whatever needed signing, to sacrifice quietly because that's what women like her do. The emotional betrayal cut deepest here. These were people who claimed to love her, yet they were willing to strip her of her father's protection without a single direct conversation. The air grew heavier with every second she didn't speak. The longer she stayed quiet, the more they relaxed, convinced they'd won without firing a shot. Isabella felt the old familiar shame creeping in, the one that whispered, maybe they're right, maybe I am asking too much. Years of living under a controlling husband had wired her to doubt herself first. But something else stirred too, a small, stubborn flame that refused to accept this as her fate. And still, no one confronted her openly. That was the genius of it. Humiliation stayed silent, polite, deniable. If she pushed back later, they could all claim surprise. We never pressured you, Bella. We just wanted what was best. The same way Raphael claimed he never controlled her, he was just guiding. Isabella sat there, hands folded, spine straight, absorbing every unspoken demand, every pitying glance, every subtle touch meant to keep her small. The silent humiliation was complete. They had reduced her to an obstacle to be managed, not a person to be heard. This section lets the viewer feel the slow, suffocating weight of collective psychological control, the kind that doesn't leave bruises but leaves scars all the same. It deepens our empathy for Isabella while building unbearable tension for what's coming. You know that moment when the room is so sure they've got you figured out that they stop watching closely? That's exactly when Isabella did the one thing nobody in that law office saw coming. She didn't slam her hand on the table. She didn't burst into tears. She didn't even raise her voice to defend herself against the silent pressure that had been piling up for the last 20 minutes. Instead, Isabella did something far more dangerous. She smiled. Not the tight, polite smile she'd worn through years of marital manipulation and emotional guilt trips. No, this was slow, calm, almost serene, the kind of smile that makes people nervous because it doesn't match what they expect. Raphael felt it first. His hand on the back of her neck stilled, like had touched something unexpectedly warm. He knew her faces better than anyone knew, the one she used when she was about to give in, the one she used when she was hurt but hiding it. This wasn't either of those. Isabella turned her head just enough to meet his eyes, and that smile stayed perfectly in place. No explanation, no words yet. Just the curve of her lips saying, I see everything you're doing. The same way she'd learned to stay quiet when his gaslighting in marriage got too loud, only this time the quiet felt different, charged, deliberate. Across the table, Diego shifted in his seat. Had been ready for resistance, maybe even a scene he could smooth over with let's not fight in front of the lawyer. But a smile? That threw him off script. Carla's pitying expression faltered for a split second, replaced by confusion. They'd spent years watching Isabella absorb emotional betrayal without pushing back, first from her controlling husband, then from the family's subtle demands. They assumed today would follow the pattern. Pressure applied, Isabella yields, peace preserved. Her smile disrupted the entire playbook. Mr. Harlan looked up from the document, sensing the shift in the room. Even he paused, glasses halfway down his nose, waiting for whatever came next. Isabella didn't rush to fill the silence. She let it stretch, let everyone feel the weight of their own assumptions. That smile wasn't angry, it was knowing. The kind of expression you wear when you've already decided how the story ends, and it isn't the ending they wrote for you. After years of psychological control wearing her down, something inside her had finally clicked into place. The cousins in the back row exchanged quick glances, the kind that say, "Did you see that?" Raphael leaned in closer, voice low and edged with warning, the same tone he used at home when he wanted her to fall in line. "Bella, whatever you're thinking." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to, they both knew the script. Only this time, Isabella didn't nod or look away. She just kept smiling, soft and steady, like she was listening to music only she could hear. A silent revenge starting to take shape right under their noses. No one knew what to do with it. In every other family drama or relationship story like this, the person being cornered either fights or folds. Isabella did neither. She sat there, posture perfect, hands folded, that gentle smile fixed like she was posing for a portrait titled Calm Before the Storm. The room had been so certain of victory that her quiet confidence felt like a glitch in their reality. You could almost hear them thinking, why isn't she upset? Why isn't she reassuring us she'll do the right thing? That smile lasted maybe 10 seconds, but it stretched time like taffy. Long enough for doubt to creep in around the edges of their certainty. Long enough for Raphael to remove his hand from her neck, suddenly unsure where to put it. Long enough for Diego to clear his throat again, this time less confidently. Isabella didn't explain herself, she didn't need to. The reaction no one expected wasn't an explosion, it was this unnerving stillness, this refusal to play the role they'd assigned her after years of emotional manipulation. And the best part? They couldn't call her out on it. A smile isn't rude. A smile isn't disruptive. A smile is polite. So they all sat there, trapped by their own etiquette, watching Isabella Montez do absolutely nothing, and somehow, in doing nothing, completely changed the power dynamic in the room. The suspense hung thick. What comes after a smile like that? They were about to find out. This section builds pure suspense by showing Isabella's unexpected calm as the first crack in their control. The viewer feels the shift, the curiosity, the unease without knowing yet what she has planned. Topic 5: The strategic silence. As that unsettling smile lingered on Isabella's face, the room seemed to hold its breath a little longer, waiting for her to fill the quiet with the usual concessions. But Isabella didn't. She let the silence stretch like a tightrope everyone else was terrified to walk. After years of being on the receiving end of psychological control, first from her controlling husband, then from the family's carefully orchestrated emotional guilt, she finally understood the power of saying nothing at all. Her silence wasn't empty, it was loaded, deliberate, the kind that makes people second-guess everything they thought they knew about you. Raphael tried first. He leaned in again, voice barely above a whisper, using that same low tone he'd perfected during their marriage whenever he wanted to steer her without witnesses. "Bella, let's not drag this out." But Isabella didn't respond. She simply turned her gaze forward, toward Mr. Harlan, as if Raphael's words were background noise. The absence of her usual soft "okay" or "I understand" left him hanging, and for the first time in years, he looked genuinely off balance. That tiny shift was everything, proof that the gaslighting in marriage only works when the target keeps engaging. Across the table, Diego tried a different angle. He gave a small, awkward chuckle, the kind men use when they're trying to lighten tension they created. "Come on, Bella, we're all on the same side here." Still nothing. Isabella crossed her hands neatly in her lap, fingers interlaced, posture impeccable. The silence grew heavier, pressing down on the room the same way their earlier whispers had pressed down on her. Only now the pressure was reversed, and they were the ones starting to squirm under it. Carla jumped in next, voice syrupy with concern. "We just want to do right by Dad's memory, sweetie." Classic marital manipulation tactic, but expanded to family size. Frame your own interests as moral superiority, then wait for the target to cave out of shame. Isabella didn't bite. She inclined her head ever so slightly, the way you acknowledge a waiter refilling your water glass, polite, distant, non-committal. The message was crystal clear: I hear you, but am not joining the conversation you're trying to force. Mr. Harlan watched the whole exchange over the rim of his glasses, fingers resting on the wheel. He'd seen plenty of family dramas unfold in this office, but something about Isabella's calm told him this one was different. She wasn't freezing up from fear, she was choosing her moment. That strategic silence was her armor, built from years of swallowing words to keep peace in a controlling marriage. Today, she was done swallowing. The cousins in the back began fidgeting, shifting papers, checking phones, anything to avoid the growing discomfort. No one had prepared for this version of Isabella. They'd rehearsed scenarios where she cried, where she argued, where she reluctantly agreed. They had no plan for quiet confidence. The longer she stayed silent, the more their earlier certainty cracked. Emotional betrayal thrives on reaction. When you refuse to react, the betrayers are left holding the bag. Then Isabella did the one small thing that turned her silence into a weapon. She looked directly at Mr. Harlan, met his eyes with perfect steadiness, and said soft, clear, unshakable, "Let the lawyer speak." Just 5 words. No drama, no accusation, no plea. But in that moment, the entire dynamic flipped. She wasn't asking permission, she was redirecting the room to the only voice that actually mattered: her father's. The same father they'd been trying to speak for minutes earlier. The sentence landed like a judge's gavel. Raphael's mouth opened, then closed. Diego blinked twice, fast. Carla's hand froze halfway to her necklace. Isabella didn't look at any of them. She kept her gaze on the lawyer, that calm smile still faintly in place, hands folded, waiting. The strategic silence had done its job. It exposed their pressure for what it was: unnecessary, premature, and now painfully obvious. And the best part? She hadn't raised her voice once. This section shows the viewer exactly how powerful calculated quiet can be, especially after years of psychological control and emotional manipulation. It's the hinge moment where Isabella takes control without ever appearing difficult, leaving everyone else exposed and nervous for what comes next. The second Isabella's quiet "let the lawyer speak" settled over the room, Mr. Harlan did exactly that. No more interruptions, no more side conversations. He adjusted his glasses once more and began reading Victor Montez's last will and testament in a clear, measured voice that left no room for misinterpretation. At first, the opening clauses sounded standard: small bequests to longtime employees, donations to charities Victor had supported. Everyone stayed calm, waiting for the part they cared about. But Isabella already knew what was coming. She'd known for months. And that knowledge was the fuel behind her silence. Mr. Harlan turned the page. "To my sons, Diego and Mateo Montez, I leave the commercial properties on Elm Street and the rental portfolio in Riverside, to be divided equally between them." Diego nodded, satisfied. Those were the income-producing assets he'd been eyeing. Raphael gave a small approving squeeze to Isabella's arm, as if to say, "See, everything's fair." But the squeeze loosened the moment the next clause began. Isabella felt a first flicker of confusion in his grip. "To my daughter, Isabella Rose Montez," Mr. Harlan continued, "I leave sole ownership of the lake house in Willow Creek, the primary residence in Coral Gables, and the entirety of the Victor Montez Trust, including all principal and future interest." The room went dead silent. Not the heavy, expectant silence from before this was stunned, breath-held shock. Isabella kept her eyes forward, face serene, letting every word land exactly as her father intended. Mr. Harlan didn't pause. He kept going, voice steady. "Furthermore, it is my express wish that these assets remain under Isabella's sole control and may not be transferred, co-signed, or encumbered without her written consent until her 50th birthday. In other words, no one could touch them. Not her brothers. Not her husband. Not through marital manipulation or family pressure." Victor had seen the controlling patterns in Raphael years ago, had watched his daughter shrink under psychological control, and had built an iron wall around her future. Diego's mouth actually opened. Carla's hand flew to her necklace like it could protect her from the words. Raphael went rigid beside Isabella, his face draining of color as the reality hit: the trust alone was worth more than everything else combined. The lake house, the one they'd all assumed would stay in the family for group vacations, was hers alone. No shared weekends, no subtle claims from siblings, no way for Raphael to leverage it in their marriage. Every assumption they'd built their pressure campaign on crumbled in real time. Mr. Harlan turned another page. "There is one additional provision. Should any beneficiary contest this will or attempt to influence Isabella's decisions regarding these assets through coercion, emotional or otherwise, their share shall be redirected to the charitable foundation in Isabella's name." Coercion. Emotional or otherwise. Victor had spelled it out plainly, the exact kind of family love they'd been pouring on her minutes earlier. The emotional betrayal wasn't just exposed, it was named, documented, and punished. The lawyer looked up briefly, letting the clause sink in, then continued with the closing formalities. But no one was listening anymore. Diego stared at the table like it had personally betrayed him. Carla's eyes welled up not from grief, but from the sudden reversal of fortune. Raphael's hand slipped from Isabella's arm entirely, falling limp into his lap. The same man who'd spent years using gaslighting in marriage to keep her off balance now looked like had been struck. They'd come in ready to carve up her inheritance instead. Her father had carved out unbreakable protection for her. And Isabella? She didn't gloat. She didn't even look at them. She simply sat there, hands still folded, that calm smile barely visible now, listening as her father's voice through Mr. Harlan delivered the final, devastating truth. Every word stripped away another layer of their control, revealing the psychological manipulation for what it was. The climax wasn't loud. It was surgical. Word by word, clause by clause, the plan they'd built on emotional guilt collapsed in front of them, leaving nothing but the echo of Victor Montes saying my daughter comes first. This section delivers the full shock of the revelation, the absolute peak where years of marital and family control are dismantled by clear, undeniable legal truth. The viewer feels the emotional justice hit like a wave. As the last clause of the will hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot, the family finally realized the trap had sprung, and they were the ones caught in it. Diego was the first to break. He half rose from his chair, palms flat on the mahogany table, voice cracking between anger and panic. This can't be right. There has to be a mistake. Mr. Harlan didn't even look up, he simply turned to the next page and kept reading the minor codicils as if Diego's outburst was background noise. That calm dismissal hit harder than any rebuke could have. Raphael's hand shot out, grabbing Isabella's wrist under the table, hard enough to leave fingerprints. You knew, he hissed, low and venomous, the same tone he used when his gaslighting failed and rage slipped through the cracks. You sat here smiling like a damn snake while he stopped himself, suddenly aware the lawyer was still speaking. But his eyes said the rest. Years of marital manipulation, of making her feel small and crazy, now turned back on him like a mirror he didn't want to face. Carla started crying, but it wasn't pretty grief, it was the sharp, indignant sob of someone who'd just watched a plan evaporate. Your father wouldn't do this to us, she choked out, looking straight at Isabella as if tears could rewrite legal documents. He loved all his children equally. The irony was thick enough to choke on. Minutes ago they'd been ready to strip Isabella of everything in the name of equality. Now that the scales had tipped the other way, equality suddenly felt unfair. Diego tried the lawyer next. Mr. Harlan, surely there's room for family discussion. Mediation. His voice shook on the last word. Translation by us. Time to pressure her again, privately, the way we always have. Harlan finally looked up, expression mild but immovable. The document is explicit, Mr. Montes. Contestation triggers immediate forfeiture to charity. He let that sink in, then added gently, your father was very thorough. Thorough. The word landed like a slap, reminding them Victor had watched every move they'd made on his daughter for years. One of the cousins in the back actually laughed, a short, shocked bark, then covered her mouth like she'd sworn in church. The sound cracked the tension wide open. Raphael released Isabella's wrist as if her skin had burned him. His face cycled through emotions too fast to track: fury, calculation, fear, and finally something that looked a lot like regret, only it came far too late to mean anything. Isabella didn't pull away, she simply let his hand fall, the same way she'd let go of so many of his excuses over the years. Carla reached across the table now, tears streaming. Bella, honey, we can talk about this. No one wants lawyers, and courts were family. The plea was desperate, stripped of the fake sweetness from earlier. Family. The word they'd weaponized 20 minutes ago now sounded hollow. Isabella met her eyes for the first time since the reading began, and whatever Carla saw there made her tears stop mid-sob. It wasn't hatred in Isabella's gaze, it was indifference, and that was worse. Diego slumped back into his chair, running both hands through his hair, suddenly looking 10 years older. We didn't mean, he started, then trailed off because they all knew exactly what they'd meant. The emotional guilt, the subtle digs, the coordinated whispers, it had all been so elegant, so deniable. Until it wasn't. Now every tactic they'd used, the same ones Raphael had perfected in their marriage, lay exposed under fluorescent light and legalese, and there was no one left to blame but themselves. Raphael tried one last time, voice soft now, the intimate register he used in bed when he wanted forgiveness without earning it. "Bella, mi amor, let's go home and talk. Just us. Home. Where the real psychological control had lived for 8 years. Isabella finally turned to him fully, and the look she gave him wasn't triumphant or cruel, it was exhausted, like she was seeing him clearly for the first time in forever. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The regret in his eyes was real, but it was the regret of a man who'd lost, not of one who'd been wrong. This section gives the audience pure catharsis, watching every manipulator scramble, apologize, backpedal, and realize, too late, that the quiet woman they underestimated had been steps ahead the entire time. Topic 8, closing with a strong lesson. The dust had barely settled in that law office, but the truth was already crystal clear. Family isn't the people who lean on you hardest when you're vulnerable. Isabella sat there, watching the scramble, feeling none of the triumph she thought she might. Instead, there was just a quiet, steady relief, like finally exhaling after holding your breath for 8 long years. The psychological control, the emotional guilt trips, the gaslighting in marriage and beyond, it all looked so small now, exposed under plain daylight and her father's unbreakable words. She realized something huge in that moment: real family doesn't demand unilateral sacrifice and call it love. They don't gather in a room to carve up your future before you've even had a chance to speak. Victor Montes had seen it all: the way Raphael slowly tightened the reins, the way her siblings always expected her to be the one who gave ground. And instead of leaving vague hopes, had drawn a line in legal concrete: my daughter will not be pressured again. That was love. Clear, protective, no strings. Isabella looked around at the faces she'd known her whole life and felt the shift inside her chest. The people who truly care don't test your loyalty by asking you to shrink. They don't use your family as leverage to get more than their share. The ones who try to control you through silence or tears or whispered expectations, they're the ones who lose when the truth finally gets its turn to speak. And today, the truth had spoken loud and clear. She didn't need to rub it in. There was no speech, no "I told you so." Just the quiet knowledge that she'd honored her father by staying calm, by refusing to play their game. The reversal of power wasn't in gloating, it was in walking out of that room with her head high, her inheritance intact, and her self-respect finally restored. After years of marital manipulation and family emotional betrayal, she'd proven something to herself: silence can be the strongest answer when you know the facts are on your side. Think about your own life for a second. How many times have you swallowed words to keep the peace? How often has "do it for the family" felt like a chain instead of a bond? Isabella's story reminds us that loyalty isn't proven by how much you're willing to give up, it's proven by who stands beside you when you finally say enough. The people who love you for real will respect boundaries, not test them. And the ones who try to manage you with guilt or quiet pressure, they usually panic the moment you stop explaining yourself. Because control only works when the other person keeps participating. Isabella stopped participating the second she smiled and said, "Let the lawyer speak." That was her power move, not loud, not dramatic, just decisive. And it changed everything. There's a lesson here that sticks: the people who push hardest for your sacrifice are often the least willing to make one themselves. Real love doesn't keep score or demand proof. It just shows up. Victor showed up for his daughter one last time, in the way that mattered most. And Isabella honored him by finally showing up for herself. So next time someone lays that heavy "do this for the family" line on you, remember Isabella Montes in that leather chair, calm smile, folded hands, waiting for the truth to do the talking. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't loud. It's just refusing to play a game that was rigged against you from the start. This final topic wraps the story with a memorable, empowering lesson that lingers, emphasizing boundaries, true loyalty, and the quiet strength of silent revenge while leaving the viewer inspired and reflective. Sabella Montez walked out of that law office that afternoon carrying more than just her father's fortune. She walked out carrying herself finally, fully, unapologetically. After years of marital manipulation, emotional guilt, and psychological control from the people closest to her, she proved that one calm smile and the courage to stay silent can shatter chains louder than any argument ever could. So hey, race, the real question for you: how long have you been sitting in your own version of that leather chair, feeling the weight of do it for the family or don't rock the boat pressing down on your chest? How many times have you swallowed your truth to keep someone else comfortable? And what would happen if, just once, you decided to let the facts speak for themselves instead of rushing to explain or defend? You don't need a dramatic showdown to reclaim your power. Sometimes all it takes is refusing to play the role they wrote for you. Set the boundary. Stay quiet when they expect tears. Smile when they expect surrender. And trust that the people who truly love you will still be standing there when the dust settles, while the ones who only loved your compliance will scatter. Start small today. The next time someone lays an emotional guilt trip on you, pause. Breathe. Ask yourself, is this love, or is it control wearing love's clothes? Then choose yourself just once and watch how the dynamic shifts. If Isabella's story hit home, if it made you feel seen, angry, hopeful, or ready to draw your own line in the sand, then do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join this community. Because every week we're sharing more stories like this, real, raw, empowering reminders that you're never as trapped as you think you are. You deserve relationships that lift you up, not ones that demand you shrink. And the moment you believe that, really believe it, is the moment everything starts to change. Thank you for coming on this journey with Isabella and with me. See you in the next one.